Hello everybody, it is me, and welcome back to another video. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do, because I am actually playing a completely different Roblox game than I usually play. I usually play Lumen Legacy, if that's what you were expecting, but today, I decided I wanted to make a video on this incredible RPG game known as Everbloom, and I wanted to break down a lot of combat tips that could help people understand the game better. And I'm really hoping that this is a good guide for everyone that's trying to get into the game. And yeah, and without further ado, let's just get straight into it. Alright, so starting off with this video, I'm going to be having some background footage I got of me actually doing combat in the game, so it's not just me standing there talking the entire time. But, starting this off, we are going to be talking about the mechanic that actually makes Everbloom much different than any of the other style of PvP, PvE games that is in this genre. And that is going to be the focus gauge. The focus gauge is by far the most important tool and mechanic in the game you can learn. Everything else is important, but this is by far the most important thing because it is the main mechanic of the game. And I hope after this you can understand when to use focus and when to not use focus. But starting off with the focus segment, I'm going to explain to you how it works. So all focus abilities can be used with the key R. I don't know if you can rebind it. And at the bottom of your screen, there's an orange little thingy, and that is your focus gauge. And it can be stored with any type of attack besides your focus attacks, of course, because if you could just restore your focus with a focus attack, it would be broken. So the first focus ability of this video we're going to be going over is the Focus Strike. Now this one is just activated by pressing R on your keyboard while not pressing any of the other keybinds that can activate a focus ability. And it uses an entire bar of your focus gauge, so it's something that you definitely want to hit instead of missing, because it is very bad if you miss this. It's very bad. Now, the Focus Strike, the strike itself, in my opinion, is slightly lackluster to me. I don't know. I think it's just slightly lackluster. It deals really strong damage, but I feel like it pushes people a little too far away to actually follow up with any real attack. And I think it can generally be considered as just a get off me tool. As you can see, it knocked back the dummy pretty far, as well as dealing a hefty chunk of damage. So it's not even that bad, but I don't know. It's definitely like not something that I would actually mainly use Focus Strike for. However, it actually has a secondary use that in my opinion is so much better than the Focus Strike itself. If you are attacked while you are performing the Focus Strike, it will instead like force the person that hit you in front of you, and it'll then say focus counter, and then they become stunned in front of you, unable to use any abilities, allowing you for some insane follow-ups. And it generally leads to higher damage than just the 10 damage that Focus Strike does, but because of how powerful Focus Strike / Focus Counter is, it is a very safe move to go for. However, it is risky because of the price it pays, because it takes a whole bar, right? But yeah, you can see how the focus counter works. And yeah, all of this seems super free, right? Instead of like you missing it. It's actually not. Because if you are holding the block keybind on some specific types of moves, you can actually block the focus strikes and counters. It'll push the blocking guy far back, and it'll also deal good shield damage. However, you do waste an entire bar of focus, and you don't get anything out of it besides some shield, which still makes it worth, but definitely the worst outcome if you're using your focus strike, right? I can show you some examples of what moves can block it and what moves can't. But yeah, that was the first focus segment. I definitely think Focus Strike is very strong. And there are other focus abilities that, in my opinion, are not as important as a Focus Strike / counter. However, there's definitely one that can probably be argued to be better than the Focus Strike or counter if used correctly in higher level gameplay. And we'll talk about one of these right now. And it's actually going to be the one that, in my opinion, is the second best focus ability. That is going to be the Focus Cancel. Now, I don't see many people actually using this ability except in very high level fights, because this is an ability that not a lot of people can react to or use super well. What Focus Cancel does is when you are casting an ability, specific abilities, you can press R before the animation of it goes out, and it'll cancel the ability, fully restoring the usage of it, and then also allowing you to get your dash cooldown back, while also gaining a damage buff and a block damage buff on some of your abilities. So some of your abilities will deal increased damage with the Focus Cancel buff, and then you'll also deal more damage to people's shields. So you can basically just give yourself a buff, but it will use half a bar of your cooldown, so just be a little careful when throwing this around, and it is really good for faking stuff out and trying to get other people's focus counters out. And yeah, I can show you an example of the buff now. And yeah, again, it can lead to really good fake outs and also solid movement options when you're canceling Earth Crusher. I'll show an example of that now. As well as like some other abilities, like your weapon abilities, you can cancel those as well. And it's definitely one of the more underrated focus abilities for newer players to learn, because it can be detrimental to people if you just master the ability itself, because it is so powerful. But the next focus ability we're going to be talking about is the Focus Guard, which can be activated when you're holding the block key while also pressing R or right click. Personally, I don't know any real human being in this world that presses R when you're trying to use Focus Guard. But maybe they're real, who knows. But anyway, Focus Guard is a very solid, like, get off me tool, because it's able to, like, force people off of you, because it's similar to Focus Strike in the sense that it can push people far away. However, it does not deal any damage. It does, however, replenish your shield a little bit if you hit it. I'll show you an example of it now. Now, me personally, I don't really use Focus Guard all too much. It's probably something that I should stop doing and I should really start using it. But I have seen top players in tournaments using this ability, and oh my god, they use it really, really well, and they time it super well, and it's a very, very strong tool if you're trying to play a more defensive game. And with that, we are on to our last focus ability, which, in my opinion, is probably maybe the worst one in terms of combat. I'm not really sure, to me. I think it's the worst one, not that it's bad, but it is going to be the Focus Dash. If you press your dash keybind, which is your Q, and then almost immediately after you press R, it'll allow your character to pretty much teleport a long distance in front of you. And I'll show you an example of that now. Now, as I said before, this ability is not used a whole lot over the other focus abilities, pretty much due to it just being a gap closing ability, because it actually has a interesting mechanic. If you're in combat and you are not facing an enemy when you're using Focus Dash, it will not send you very far at all. I'll show you it now. But yeah, Focus Dash is mainly used as a gap closing ability that is really good at putting pressure on your opponent to keep fighting you, and it's not really, you can't really retreat with it, right? And I think that's a really good thing, because no one likes people that run, right? If you started a fight and then you run away in the end, fight it out, man. Come on. But I believe with all of that, we're actually done with the focus part of the video. Technically, we have one more thing to talk about with the focus, which is arguably more important than all the focus abilities combined. That's the exhaust state. Now, when you use all of your focus meter, your gauge, all of it, you will enter a state that heavily hinders you. Like, you don't want to get in the state at all. I'll show an example of it. Now, in this exhausted state, you will deal 15% less damage, take 15% more damage, no longer regain your mana passively, which we'll get into mana, and your mana received through attacks is lowered by 50%. Your dash cooldown is increased, your evasive is disabled, which we'll get into all this stuff. You take 50% more block damage, and to top it all off, you cannot use any focus-based abilities. Yeah, if you get into your exhausted state, all your only defensive capabilities are either your flash counters, which is an ability, or your blocks, which can be very easily beaten by clicking right click, right? But yeah, there are some points where you can deal with going into your exhausted state, as long as like your opponent is really low and you can like guarantee killing them. If you can't guarantee a kill, it is never worth exhausting yourself. It really is not. And if you want to like recharge your gauge, you have to land your moves. It will passively recharge though over time. So you can stall them out, but people will push you if you're an exhaust. But yeah, that tops off all of the focus segments. By far the most important mechanic in the game to master. It is by far the best. But yeah, now we're going to get into like the beginner combat knowledge that people should 100% know. And we've gone over all the focus abilities. However, now we need to know how to actually properly fight in the game. And now that you can use your focus abilities effectively, we're going to go over the most basic knowledge you can bring into a 1v1 against your friends or other people. Now, the most basic form of combat is, of course, just going to be an M1, right? You're just clicking them. All weapons currently in the game, as of the open combat test, as of the time I'm recording this, have 4 stages of M1s. The first 3 just deal damage and put the opponent in a hit stun. The fourth and last, will send the target flying backwards and ragdoll them. So it's basically you can M1, 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 M1. The fourth one will just have them go bye. It's like a get off me tool in a way. Personally, when I'm doing combos, I don't want to use my 4th M1 as it can disrupt the flow of my combo, and it can sometimes like make me like, oh, why did I do that? Wait, I need to get back to them. Wait, what do I do? And I kind of mess up, right? And if you M1 a target while they are casting Focus Strike, which will then turn into a focus counter, you can actually put up your shield, allowing you to waste enemy focus and take no damage, as I have showed in a previous clip. You can see in that last one, I M1'd him, shielded, and then I was fine. There are, however, some things that you cannot block. And now we're going to get into our M2s, being your right click. They are very important. They only have 1 stage, but they have a special thing about them. They are able to guard break. Guard breaking an opponent completely breaks their shield, puts them in a stun, allowing you for quick follow-ups for huge damage. However, most M2s, I like to use the Rapier, which has technically a 2-stage M2, which will slash them, guard break them, dash forward, and then it will deal damage after the dash and put them on top of you, essentially. But the M2s are very, very important, and you should probably be using them as often as you can, because it can really catch people off guard. Because with M1s, you can't break their guard. With M2s, you can. However, M2s do have a charge up that M1s do not have, giving them some risk factor to it if your opponent is literally Goku and can react to everything that you do. And of course, as with the M1s, you can also block focus strikes / counters if you're fast enough to react with an M2. I'll show you an example of this now. And yeah, you can also change your M2 by changing the offhand in your customize tab by pressing M. You can go change that. And I've never used any of them because I've always just used pure Rapier, so feel free to experiment. Now, the next thing we're going to be talking about going to be the mana. Now, mana itself is incredibly important to preserve because all weapon skills in the game require the use of mana. To see some of the cost of your abilities, get out of shift lock, hover over the skill, and you're going to see your mana. And that's how you can know. if you attempt to use a spell, not a weapon skill, because you cannot use a weapon skill if you are out of mana. If you attempt to use a spell when you're out of mana, you will misfire, causing you to take small damage, and it'll ragdoll you backwards, which is terrible. I'll show you an example of this now. Yeah, mana is incredibly important to preserve, almost as important as the focus gauge, because if you run out of mana, you can't use your spells, which are very important in game. And you can't use your spells, you get punished for it, and you can't even use your skills because they are completely blocked off. Now, this next thing I'm talking about isn't exactly like a combat knowledge thing you need to know, but it is something worthwhile to learn, because as of the time of recording this, there are 3 race abilities. There are races that you can choose in game, and 3 of them have abilities to them. There is Burrow, Feather Ascent, and Wild Crash. Burrow is on the Seedling race. It is generally pointless to use in battle because you stun yourself, and you can't really get out of the Burrow fast enough to take advantage of it. And you're just kind of trapped and you just get so much free damage on you. It's generally terrible to use in game, or in battle, sorry. And you're trapped until you use your Burrow again. However, it does give you a little bit of health back. So if you're fighting on like a cliff or something, you can hit them off the map, hit an enemy off the map, and then immediately go into your Burrow, and then you're going to be balling because you're going to get a little bit of your health back. And now Feather Ascent is on the Quillian race. Now, what Feather Ascent does is it just makes you fly upward a little bit. That's it. That's all it does. It can be used to fake out enemies if they're going for abilities, but that's it. And the final one is Wild Crash, which is on the Wild Horn race. It works very similar, if you've ever played Smash Bros, to Luigi's side B, because you'll charge it up. When you let go, it'll dash you forward to deal damage. The longer you're holding it down, the more damage it will deal, and the further it will send you. I can show you an example of all the skills now. Now, if we're gonna get into the next segment of this, we're talking about your health. Now, your health is incredibly important. It is literally how you survive in the game, right? If your character falls below 0%, you will die. I understand this is common knowledge. However, what might not be common knowledge is the lower that your HP is, the less effective your movement options become, such as your dash, your walk speed, your run speed, and Aqua Dive, and other abilities like that. I'll show an example of this now. But yeah, that is very detrimental to miss or get low on HP. But the next thing we're going to talk about is the run. If you double tap your W keybind, or whatever your forward moving keybind is, you'll begin running forward, allowing for quicker movement and allowing you to use an M1 it would then become a running attack. A running attack will lunge yourself forward, using a stage of your M1 in the process, and running attacks are a great way to close the gap between opponents, as well as serve as sort of a safe poking tool that can sometimes be easily punished by people with good reaction time and well-played counters. However, when you're using a running attack, you're not safe versus flash counter and focus counters if they react fast enough. There are also enchants in the game that can give you different passive effects, and you can see them all in game, but I'll give them a rundown of what they all do. Poison is a 1 in 4 chance to deal a little damage over time effect that will deal 1.5 HP, and after the proc it'll go on a cooldown. Blazing is the same 1 in 4 chance to deal a damage over time effect, however it will deal 0.8 damage until it's removed by water effects or a dash. So generally it is better than poison. Wrath makes it so if you are below 35% HP, you will deal 12% more damage, so kind of like a final fervor, right? And now the impact enchant will make it so your final hits on your M1s, M2s, and the base strike of Focus Strike will deal an additional 8% damage and send them further back. This one is a little impractical because it's kind of hard to hit the last hit of your M2s and M1s, but hey, it could work. Vampirism has a 1 in 8 chance, I believe, to heal on an M1 for like 2.5 HP. It's not 1 in 2, sorry, not 1 in 8. I don't know where I got 1 in 8. 1 in 2 chance to heal on an M1 for 2.5 HP with an 8-second cooldown between the procs. So technically, if you hit someone at least twice, you have the health advantage at 102.5 HP. However, it will not proc if you are at 100 HP. You have to be below 100. And then light makes it so if you perfect block or focus guard, you'll deal increased damage that stacks up to 4 stacks. 1 stack of light is 3%, 2 stacks is 6%, 3 stacks is 11, 4 stacks is 14% more damage. If you get guard broken, put your weapon away, or not land a perfect block or focus guard for a little bit, one of these stacks will disappear. And the last enchant we have is luck. Luck makes it so every attack has a chance to essentially like flip a coin. And if you land positive, you gain 10% more damage. If you roll negative, however, you will deal 8% less damage. If you land 4 positive flips in a row, you will enter jackpot mode, making every single hit you do always give you the 10% damage buff and also heal a little bit. Overall, these enchants are all really good. I know that the meta right now is to use blazing because it's just really, really strong and entirely free because it also uses up an enemy dash. But hey, use whatever you want. But yeah, I wouldn't use poison though. Just use blazing if you're gonna use poison. Like, come on. But yeah, getting into the next thing, we're gonna be talking about the weapon skills in the game. Now, personally to me, I've always used the rapier, so I'm not actually super experienced when it comes to using other abilities, but I'll talk about the rapier. Rapier gets a signature skill called Needle Barrage, which hits about 5 times for small damage, then pushes the enemy backwards with 1 final slash for solid damage. There are some weapon abilities actually that can guard break. Rapier is not one of them. Notable ones are Greatsword and Gauntlets. Weapon skills are essential on pretty much all builds. It is foolish to not use a weapon skill. However, all weapon skills are what my friends and I have dubbed as Overcommittle Abilities. Basically, Overcommittle Abilities are skills that you are unable to react in time if the opponent uses focus counter. So if you are to use like an Earth Crusher, for example, and your opponent uses a focus counter, you are actually going to be completely unable to react to, you can't block in time to stop the focus counter from hitting you. So this is where you could go for like a focus cancel to fake out your opponents. And any spells also are overcommittal, like your aqua dives and stuff. All weapon skills are also overcommittal. And generally in fights, what you want to do is save your focus counters or your flash counters for these overcommittal abilities. Be warned though, focus cancel is an option if they decide to fake out your moves. I'll show an example of that. Now, as of right now, there are 2 global skills in the game that all weapon classes have access to. That is Flash Counter and Earth Crusher. Earth Crusher is a strong guard-breaking leap plus slam move. I'll show it off. It is strong as an approach tool, but can also easily be beaten by well-timed M1s, plus a focus strike slash counter because again, it's an overcommittal ability. Now, Flash Counter is the other global ability, and to me it has always been a very weird ability to me. It has a slight startup time for a counter, but it is a really strong out of shield option. If you're pressured by M1s, just wait till one M1 hits your shield. The second the M1 hits your shield, let go of your shield, click your Flash Counter, and you should be able to smack him in the face to push him off of you. And it can also be used to counter air attacks, as long as you react in time. Now in this segment, we're going to be talking about the spells and mana you have access to. Well, I think I already talked about mana. Sorry, I never deleted that off this freaking script. Now at the time of recording this in the open combat test, there are 2 magics to choose from, fire and water. The game starts you out with fire, if I recall. You have access to the abilities Explosive Swipe and Ignition Leap. Explosive Swipe is a really strong combo finisher in my opinion, and it applies burn and ragdolls anyone who was hit, allowing for really solid chip damage, and it also works as a spacing tool for neutral ground. The next is Ignition Leap, which causes you to leap up in the air, ragdolling and burning people who were hit. And I've only ever really seen Ignition Leap as like a combo finisher, most notably from the Gauntlet weapon, so I can't really say a whole lot about it because I personally don't use the fire magic, so I'm not sure. Now personally, I like the water spells in this game, specifically the Aqua Dive spell. This spell allows you to go underwater, becoming completely immune to damage and avoids any damage effects while underwater. It also, if hit, will force the opponent essentially right on top of you, allowing for another combo to start, so it's really strong. While it all sounds great on paper, it's incredibly easy to react to. Like, it's very simple to react to. It's very susceptible to counter-based abilities like your focus counters and flash counters, so be wary when you're using it, and you can pretty much use it as like a fake out tool, try to fake opponents to going for their focuses and flash counters. I'll show examples of it. And then there is Bubble Trap. Bubble Trap is another water ability that makes you slam down on the ground and trap your opponent in a bubble. If they're close enough to you. And after a little bit, the bubble will pop, ragdolling the enemy for a very short amount of time. Now this ability is strong as a get off me tool or a combo finisher. I don't use it very often, so I can't really comment on it. I really only use Aqua Dive. And there are also some Wisp abilities, where if you hold down the Water Wisp or Fire Wisp keybind for about 1.5 seconds, you'll throw the Wisp, causing a small explosion that has different effects for each Wisp. The Water Wisp will trap opponents in a bubble and make it move up in the air, and then it'll pop. And the Fire Wisp knocks you backwards and sets you on fire and sends you really high up in the air, I've noticed. And I'll be honest, neither of these Wisps are very practical to hit in combat. However, there are no abilities that can actually block this Wisp. So you can't focus guard it, you can't flash counter it, you can't focus strike it, you can't do anything. You have to dodge these abilities. So it could have some uses in getting people's dodges if you want to try to do something with that. There is one final thing I should probably talk about before we get into the more advanced combat, and that is the air attack. When jumping and performing an M1, you will lunge forward using a stage of your M1. Air attacks are a really good approaching tool and can even be can be dodged or even uppercutted to if reacted to in time. However, we will get into uppercuts. Don't worry, those are a bit more advanced, I'd say. Air combat is a bit harder than base combat. Not gonna lie, I almost forgot about Evasive. Evasive is bound to your G key, and it is an insta-use get off me tool. It knocks back your opponent if you hit them with it. If you miss it or they block it, you'll be stunned for a short time, and you have to be wary of that because it is a very strong get off me tool, yet it has a very long cooldown, so you want to hit this move. And if you do hit them with it, you can instantly react to it. So, yeah. And that is pretty much all of the basic combat you need to know to understand the game and how it functions and all the different interactions. However, now we're going to be talking about a bit more advanced things, right? And this is stuff that you could see higher level players doing because this is a bit more technical stuff that we're going to get into. The first thing I want to talk about is uppercutting. Now, I know some people might debate that uppercutting isn't exactly an advanced tool, as it is one of the basic things in the game that you need to know. However, I think that it's something that I don't see many people using, so I think that it is very worth learning this skill. If you are really good at reading their moves, then this is going to be an invaluable tool. To use uppercut, you have to hold down the left control, then press M1. This will then use your uppercut. Essentially what it does is if your opponent uses an air-based attack, like the air attacks that we just talked about, you will now uppercut them, anti-air them, and then you'll send them in the air and you'll be right in front of them. And when this happens, I would 100% recommend using a guard breaking attack, because 99% of the time, everyone holds F when they are in the air. I would 100%, I think the best option, in my opinion, when you get off a uppercut, is to immediately follow it up with an M2. No matter what weapon you're using, follow it up with an M2. It is incredibly free, because even if they react to it in focus guard, you are going to be able to react to it and block. You literally just get to click M2 completely for free. Another thing I can show off is going to be perfect casting. When you're using spells, a little diamond in the center of your screen will appear. And if you left click as the little like diamond ring around it closes in, the spell will become empowered and we actually have enhanced effects. Perfect casting, in my opinion, isn't something that is 100% necessary to beat opponents, but it is a very, very good mechanic to master, as perfect casting also restores a little bit of your mana when used, and it's just a very good thing to learn because it's literally just free damage and all you have to do is click. And another little thing about water spells and fire spells is their passives. Fire, all it does is it burns you, and all you have to do is dash and the burn will go away. However, water is different as it has two different passives. One of it is just like if you cast a water-based spell when you're on fire, you put the fire out. It's not super practical as it wastes your water spell instead of you just clicking your dash button to get rid of the fire. But it isn't terrible with Aqua Dive, as Aqua Dive already kind of forces you to move. So if you're on fire and you Aqua Dive and you don't want to use your dash, go for it. The other passive that water has is something that not a lot of people understand how it works. It's called Recycle. You can read about it in elemental passives in like the tutorial book. All the stuff's in the tutorial book. I'm just wanting to break it down to make it easier for everyone to understand. But what it does is whenever you use a water spell, you gain a stack of Recycle. Perfect casting grants 2. Upon reaching 2 of these stacks, you will gain a bubble shield that causes you to take reduced damage and also become immune to burn. If you hit an opponent with a water spell while affected with this shield, you will transfer it onto them, where soon after it will explode, dealing damage. It actually deals like 6 damage, which is insane for how good this move is to hit. It can be blocked, however, but a lot of people don't actually know how this works. I'll show an example. And now one of the final things I can talk about in the advanced category is going to be the air counter. This is one of the most impractical things in the entire game that you can do in a fight. It still has some uses, however. Air counter can be used when you're holding control, then you also press M2 while aiming at an enemy. However, you have to be far enough away from the enemy, and the enemy has to be airborne. So you can definitely see why this is impractical, because since there's no ranged-based weapons right now, a lot of combat is very up close, right? So this is a very impractical thing to hit. However, it does have its uses against the Quillian race, because the Quillian race, as I showed you before, has a passive that makes you fly up in the air. And if you're far enough away from them when they use this for whatever reason, you are able to use this air counter and you can get close enough to slash them in the face and close the gap. And it also works if you hit the empowered Water Wisp. And now I believe the final thing that I can actually talk about in this video is going to be perfect blocking. If you press your guard button as a guard breaking move is about to hit you, you will perfectly block it, sending the attacker backwards and replenishing some of your focus meter, or your guard meter, sorry. And it acts essentially identical to a focus guard, yet it doesn't use your focus. However, do note that you cannot perfect guard moves that do not guard break. So only like an Earth Crusher or certain weapon skills can actually be used to perfect block. Because with M1s, focus guard can block those, but you cannot perfect guard stuff that doesn't guard break. And actually, I believe that is pretty much everything I've talked about, right? I think I've gone through pretty much everything, and hopefully that you all enjoyed, and I really hope you give this game the attention that it deserves. It 100% deserves all the attention that it gets. It is such a high quality game. The combat feels so fun. I'm completely addicted to it. and I really hope that you all give this game a shot, because it is well worth the time to learn, just because of how fun it is. But yeah, hope that you all enjoyed, and I will see everyone later. Bye-bye!